Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Alternatives Podcast. Today, we have two special guests, so you get double the blessing here. And the topic is on how to navigate tough family dynamics during COVID. And for us, this is great for us to have Chip Whitman and Katie Kirgiss here to speak about this topic. And I think it affects all of us. Depending on your definition of tough, it's navigating family dynamics. Goodness. So, Katie, why don't you start? Tell us a little bit about yourself, and then we'll move over to Chip, and he can tell us a little bit about him.
Sure. All right. Well, thank you guys for having me. Like Tammy said, I'm Katie Kirgiss. I have recently graduated from Bethel Seminary with my master's in marriage and family therapy. So I am just starting that long journey towards licensure. Newly married, I'm COVID bride with my, live here in Escondido with my husband, Tori. And right now I'm working as a program manager for Transitions Family Program at Hannah's House. That's a nonprofit agency that offers low-cost therapy services to the community. And they also work with the courts and provide supervised visitation services. So we get a lot of referrals for like high conflict families, but we work with kids, couples, entire families, individuals, co-parents, and that sort of thing. So yeah.
That's neat.
Wow. That's really cool.
And Chip?
Yeah, I'm kind of at the end of the road. I've got about a month till retirement, but I've been in public pastoral ministry for 46 years.
Wow.
In 3 different states, and I've been at Emmanuel Faith Community Church for 12 years. I serve as the pastor of care and counseling, and love it. I hate to retire, but my family and I were all moving up to Vancouver, Washington, as soon as we sell our house. So that's for sale, and we'll see.
Wow. Wow.
So yeah, I've been in ministry either as a psychotherapist or a pastor, or sometimes a combination of both, for really over 4 decades.
Wow. Well, so there you have it. We have somebody just getting into it and somebody just leaving. Both of you, I'm sure, have reasons why you became involved in counseling. And obviously, for both of you, Chip, for as many years as you've done it, you have to have a passion for it and for people and for what they're going through. So can both of you share a little bit about your story as to why you're doing this and what got you here? Katie, you could start.
Okay, sure. Yeah, this career path for me kind of came out of my own personal history with mental health issues and family struggles. I became a Christian much later in life, and so this is actually kind of a second career for me. God really showed me this vocation, kind of turned things around, pointed me in this direction. And so what I'm really passionate about is not just, that's, the typical, you've gone through it, you can share what you've learned and your experiences to help others. Yes, that's part of it. But for me, it's this offering hope is so huge. And that's one of the biggest factors in therapy and in counseling, is offering hope. And, that's what makes me passionate about it. Is I know there's hope. I've experienced it, but, I also want to convey that to others. And that's what really drives me, is that providing hope to hopeless individuals.
Sure. I think many of us can get stuck or just for whatever life has thrown at them, and just that opportunity to sit down and have someone help you navigate through thoughts and feelings and past and putting it all together. And it is that there's hope and there's such freedom in that. It's the the weight, I don't think many of us realize the weight that we carry on our shoulders. And when you have the opportunity to be with a counselor, it just lightens the load so much. I know Emmanuel Faith, they have a wonderful care and counseling, and I say yay and amen to that group, because they've definitely helped me in different times. And I'm not, I would tell anyone, don't hold off, go and talk to somebody way before, because that hope, that freedom is huge. Chip, what about you?
I had been in pastoral ministry for about 10 years. I was pastoring up in Portland, Oregon, and had a church of about 125 people, and I pastored there for 5 years. But in that 5 years, there were 2 people who died, both dear friends. In a church that size, you get to know everybody. And I was able to do the funerals and the memorials and all of that, but I didn't know what to do with the family members after. And that really got me thinking. And I was already halfway through my master's degree. I was going to get an MDiv, Master of Divinity in pastoral ministry. And I decided to change to a Master of Arts in Counseling Psychology and specialize in bereavement. So that completely changed my pathway. And so after I graduated, I moved back down to Southern Cal, lived in Orange County, started a ministry called Grief Care, and had that for 15 years. The first church I ever came and spoke at was Emmanuel Faith. And so we had a long relationship for about 27 years now. So I'm still a bereavement specialist. As a matter of fact, when I moved to Vancouver, we're starting a whole new ministry called Hope Harbor, a safe place for change. And I'll be doing podcasts and blog posts and writing books and articles and stuff. So
Okay, so this is like
This
no
is a warm-up
retirement.
for
You're
you.
just moving on to something.
it's a retirement from pastoral ministry, but yeah, no, I'll keep going as long as I have breath.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I don't want to ever quit, really.
Great. Well,
I love hearing the stories behind, because everybody has some story behind why they do what they do. It's so cool to hear that. And
Yeah.
just knowing so many people, like I've gone through counseling at UCC and have friends who have, and just hearing like the heart behind like where you came from, and just seeing my friends that have just been so blessed by that. It's really cool. So just diving right in, talking about tough family dynamics. And I know things are a little different right now because it's kind of let up a little bit, but we still have, I know for me, I had a lot more time in the middle of quarantine to really like sit and process through things. And I mean, if we're processing and we're in the same house with somebody, that can be hard. And the family dynamics in this season, it's just right there a lot of the time. And how has COVID changed the dynamics with family at home? And then what are some of the factors that are making family dynamics at home challenging right now?
Chip, do you want to start?
Okay. Yeah, I've noticed though in the last almost 4 months, the people I talk to, high at the top of their list is anxiety, stress, anxiety, which can lead to depression, a lot of anger people feel, and I think we all feel it from time to time, just stuck, closed in, just trapped. And the uncertainty of when is this going to end, and how long do I have to wear a mask, and when can I, do almost anything again. So it's put a stress on marriage, put a stress on families, put a stress on individuals. There have been 2 people I've talked to just in the last month that were suicidal. And these are believers. These are people that know the Lord, and these are people that still just get tired, really tired and worn out. And so thankfully neither one did commit suicide, but they were feeling the suicidal thoughts and ideas. And I'm glad to say that they are on the other side of that, but it's not uncommon. And people, I think, because of the stress, not knowing what to do, part of it's the uncertainty. It's like, I don't know how long. Just tell me when I can go out and really, and people can now a little more, but still it's not the same when you're 6 feet away from everybody and you want to hug them, but you don't dare. It's,
Yeah.
you know, it's tough on everybody.
If
So
you do and they scream, that's happened.
that's when you know they go
Oh,
like
I'm sorry,
this.
I
No.
forgot.
Exactly. So I do a lot of calls during the week because I've been working from home. Our staff just went back to the offices this week. For those of us who are old, like me, I'm staying home for a while longer. It's just not quite safe yet for me to be out in public. So I may just finish at home, but I do a lot of phone calls and emails and texting people. And what I found out is almost universally, it's the stress that's getting to people, and sleeplessness, arguments, little things, irritations, all of it.
Mm.
Mhm. Wow.
Yeah. So
To add on, Katie?
Yeah, I think just like what Chip said, the biggest factor is the stress. And that comes from, you know, not just being in confinement with your family and like personalities clashing and the uncertainty. There's the economic hardship if you lost a job or jobs. You know, the increased responsibilities if you have kids at home, and now in addition to, you know, working from home and being, you know, being a parent and keeping a house, now you're schooling your kids, you're homeschooling your kids. And that's a huge pressure on parents as well. Even having adult children in college that now have to come back home. Now you have these you have, you know, these young adults trying to, you know, find their autonomy or forced back into a home with a parent. And, you know, that creates stress in itself. I think another thing that we've been seeing, and there's some kind of early studies that show there's this, we suspect an uptick in domestic violence. There's kind of mixed data that shows like actual reports are down, but calls to agencies are up. So it's like there's an increase, but victims aren't able to follow through on filing reports because there's nowhere to go, and, you know, resources are limited. So that's, I think, another thing that we're seeing. And it's just, you know, whatever the family dynamic is, when you are confined and you're put under stress, it's just exacerbated.
Yeah. Hard stuff, heavy stuff. Within someone's home, the hard, the yucky, the messy, sometimes we need to put up boundaries. Can you talk a little bit about that, and how does somebody know if they need to create a boundary with a certain family member, or just, but yeah, just the idea of boundaries and how to know if that's something you need.
go ahead, Katie.
Okay. You know, I would always say to that, pay attention to your emotions. Pay attention to the body sensations that you're feeling. If you don't have a real good grip or able to identify emotions. So do you have tight chest, heavy breathing? Do you get, you know, tense? Are you feeling angry or irritable, anxious? Are you withdrawing? Are you pulling away? Some of the, like, those are, our emotions are these indicators that tell us something's going on here. There might be something to address. And a lot of the times it's, you know, might have to do with a boundary issue.
Yeah, agreed. Especially when we're living in close quarters and we don't have the ability just to get away for a while. I found it. I'm a really strong introvert, so I really cherish my quiet time. My wife is more of an extrovert, so, you know, we kind of try to balance that out. But what's going to be fun with us is we're moving in with my son, daughter-in-law, my grandson, and my son's work partner. So all 6 of us are going to live together.
Wow.
That'll be fun. And we're all different personality types, so that should be fun. But I think giving each other grace is huge. But knowing, like Katie said, when your emotions are getting to the point where they're starting to boil over, and like somebody said, I have one nerve left and you're standing on it, that's when you know it's time to say something. And maybe we'll talk in a bit about, how to create a boundary, but that's really when emotionally something's not working here and I can't take it anymore. It's really time to talk some things through.
And it's okay to set up those boundaries too. And boundaries, they're not bad things, they're good things.
Yes.
Can you talk about that, like how to set that and also like how to communicate that?
Yeah, I'll go. What I've worked with for a long time is trying to use a paradigm of DHR. D stands for direct, H stands for honest, and R stands for respectful. So anything I have to communicate, if I really want to get it across, I need to be direct. Don't tell a long story. Don't come in the back door. Don't hem and haw. Just be direct. Honest means if there are corresponding emotions, you express them. If you're angry, say you're angry. And you don't do it like, so angry about you, I just could kill you. That's my worst Bill Clinton imitation, but that is. Anyway, just honest, real honest about it. And the respectful part just means you don't have any expletives, no name calling, anything that'll distract somebody. Keep that to yourself. And then just, if we can learn to talk with I messages instead of you messages. If I'm concerned, I want to start the sentence with, I am concerned. I am worried, I'm upset, I am whatever, versus you, because anytime we start a sentence with you, the other person kind of backs up and says, what'd I do? So DHR, direct, honest, respectful, I think always gets the job done.
That's great. I wrote that down.
There you go, Kate.
Yeah. To piggyback off that, basic assertive communication skills, using those I statements. I think it's also important too to figure out what your boundary is before you try and communicate it, so that if you don't know what you need, it's really hard to explain that to somebody else in a clear and honest way. And I think the other thing too is, if there's consequences tied to this, communicate the consequences as well. If you step over this boundary, here's how I'm going to respond.
Yes.
Taking ownership of your thoughts, your emotions, your behaviors, and not what the other person is going to do, because you can't control that.
Yeah. So then what if that boundary is crossed, if it's not honored? What are there, like you said, there could be consequences to that.
Mm-hmm.
So what does that look like?
And when you think about tying consequences to a boundary violation, they need to be proportionate and appropriate. If you don't say to your spouse, if you don't stop playing that music so loud, I'm going to leave you, you're just going to say, hey, do you think we could turn the volume down a little bit? If not, I'm going to go in the other room. They need to be appropriate and proportional, and also you need to follow through and be consistent. And be prepared for maybe a little bit of a backlash also. A lot of times if people aren't used to us enforcing healthy boundaries, and all of a sudden they come up against it, they can get a little upset and get a little angry. They keep trying to guilt trip you, all of that. So you need to be prepared that they might respond in that way.
Can I just interject here? Earlier, there was mention about extending a lot of grace. And so how does one go from grace to boundaries? I don't think we do that really well, because it's like grace upon grace and then you're done. And how can, I know that's not on the questions, but we're moving this way. Because I would imagine people might be saying that, well, I've been giving grace, I don't know how to now switch over.
Yeah, it's a great question, Tammy. I think part of grace is what's enfolded in grace is honesty, and that if I'm going to be gracious, then I'm going to be truthful, I'm going to be honest, I'm going to tell you where I'm at, why I'm that way. And even before, if there needs to be a confrontation, I have to think about what the consequence could be if that is not followed. I can't just make that up on the spot. And the worst thing I can do, and I've been guilty of it, and I've seen other parents do it, is say, I'm not going to tell you one more time. And then that's the fifth time that they've told the child that. And we do that with, even we do that with spouses, friends as well. And if we don't follow through, that's graceless. Because grace means, yeah, this is who I am, this is what I expect, and now you know the boundaries, and I hope that you choose to follow them. I will have the same respect for you, but this is the consequence if they're not followed. And I think that really is wrapped up in grace. Sometimes we get what's called greasy grace, and greasy grace means it's a slippery slope. We can't be trusted because we don't follow through with what we say. So real grace means, yeah, I'm gonna live the way I speak, and I'll follow through.
Yeah, your yeses mean yeses, your no means no. You follow through, yeah, on what you were saying. One thing that you said earlier, you were talking about kind of in this time right now, there's this feeling of people feeling trapped with being at home versus, oh my gosh, what's next? How do we plan? How do we do whatever's next? And it's when we're at home, that's really hard. How can somebody feel at peace when they're at home and that's going on and there's just hard family stuff happening?
I can go. Sure. I think one thing to try, and I know it's hard to do, is create space if you can. That might be your own, private space at home in your own room, or if you have to take a walk, get outside, create that physical space. Sometimes, having a physical boundary doesn't necessarily mean there's an emotional or like mental boundary, but a lot of times that can helps get you there. Keep your healthy routines. The basics, like getting enough sleep, eating properly, sticking to a schedule, that are just kind of like the basic, they help you cope mechanisms, right? And that helps you deal with stress. I would also say to try and stay connected. We have this technology here. Try and stay connected with who's your supportive community? Who are your resources that aren't in your home, that can offer you an ear that you can bounce things off of, that can pray with you, stay in touch. We have, I'm guilty of this, getting really, really lax in some of the relationships that aren't in my home. But, it's really, we're all part of this huge community, not just in our houses. And it's really important to stay connected with those other people. Like, you don't get to choose your family, right? And sometimes sometimes you might, not get along, or you're placed in a pretty difficult spot, but you get to pick your community and the people that you associate with. And when you surround yourself with believers and godly people who are uplifting and edifying and supportive, you need to reach out to those resources when you can.
Yeah. And it's good to have honest friends who will tell you the truth. If we're getting sideways, we're getting too cranky, we're getting too just have an attitude about things, or just seem to be falling away from our faith, somebody who will really love us and say, hey, I'm concerned about you. Oh, why? I just noticed some things and I'd like to talk about them. And that's part of having a boundary as well. It's not necessarily boundaries that keep people away. It's often a boundary that says, I want to help you. I want to walk with you. I'd like to hold you accountable, and I'd like the same thing from you. And when we can do that, that really deepens relationships. We may not have more than 2 or 3 friends or close family members that'll do that, but when we do, it gives us a great sense of security. And when we have that security, everything else seems a little easier. I know in our home, it's just my wife and I here now, but we have to respect each other's boundaries. We're both working full-time from home. So I have my little office and she has hers, and we have to keep fairly regular. What I've noticed for me is at the end of the day, rather than just plopping down in front of the TV on my recliner, I've gotten to reading, and that has been a blast. I didn't know how much fun that was. So I've been reading novel after novel. I've really gotten into all the John Grisham novels, so I'm loving that. Glad I didn't become an attorney, but I love his stuff, and I love reading all kinds of things. And that's been a nice balance, because then not just the novels, but just anything I'm reading, we'll end up talking about that over dinner or on a drive or anything else. And it's kind of like, okay, this has been my world and this has been her world. We don't talk about work. We talk about what we're reading and viewing and stuff. So that's helpful.
Mm.
Okay. That's a really good example.
Mm-hmm.
What are some resources for people that need help with these family dynamics? I know you gave some tools, but are there resources that people can reach out to as well? Not everybody has the friends that you're speaking of that could hold you accountable. That is a friend that loves at all times. Iron sharpens iron. They don't have that. Sometimes the friends are egging them on too. So where's a healthy resource that could help people with the family dynamics?
I'll give you my 4. I looked up, I don't have any of these books. Actually, they're all new. But I looked up on a Christian website some books that have to do with stress, and they look pretty good. I thought I might buy 1 or 2. If I may, can I list them?
You
Is that
can.
right?
Yeah.
Okay. The first one is called Stand All the Way Up by Sophie Hudson. Stories of staying in it when you want to burn it all down. I like the subtitle, because there are times when you want to burn it all down. Second book, Uncommon Ground by Tim Keller. Most of us know Tim Keller. Living Faithfully in a World of Difference. And boy, do we see that a lot right now. Third book, Winning the Worry Battle by Barb Roose, Roose. Life Lessons from the Book of Joshua. And the fourth one is called Stress, How to Cope at the End of Your Rope. I love that title. Managing Various Stages of Stress. So those are 4 books that I found that are new, and you can probably get them at any bookstore, any Christian bookstore. They look good.
Okay, you haven't read any of them. Maybe Uncommon Ground.
No, the one I'd recommend the most probably be Tim Keller's, because I like a lot of his writing. So
Yeah, me too.
What about the book? I think it's called Boundaries.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
There you go. Henry Cloud and
Yes.
John Townsend. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. It's a very good, really, really good resource and faith-based. And they have now versions for boundaries with teens, boundaries in dating, boundaries for couples. So kind of tailored to these specific relationships. So I pulled that out immediately when I heard that the boundaries was going to be a top. I'm like, this is a fantastic resource.
Mm-hmm.
There's another one. I think it's Pete Scazzaro. It's Emotionally Healthy Spirituality.
Oh.
Really just talks about our emotional health and our spiritual health are so closely tied, and it's almost like you don't really have one without the other. Another great book. There's one called, I'm looking at my bookshelf across the way. I should remember. Raising an Emotionally Intelligent Child by John Gottman. We learn a lot of our coping mechanisms and, how to deal with our emotions from our parents and how they're modeled. And that book talks about, for parents, how do you respond in a way that heightens your child's emotional intelligence? So how do you tune to them, you respond, you show them an effective way of coping and dealing with emotions and, raising that emotional intelligence. And that helps if you have a child who learns those skills early on. It helps later in life when stressful situations happen and stuff like this, you're stuck in situations like this and you're having really difficult emotions, they know how to cope with them. you know how to deal with them, and they've been practicing it ideally for a long time.
Mm.
I think these are, I want to order some. These are great resources to have. I think for listeners that are out there, if this isn't an issue that you're having, it might be in the future. I think there's, we've seen phases of COVID, so to speak. When it first started, I know all my kids were home in all their respective boyfriends, girlfriends, fiancés, and they felt like it was a snowstorm, like it was a snow day, you know, and there was kind of this giddiness in the house for 3 weeks. And then when it was like one more month, there was like depression at dinner. Everybody was just sitting, and then everybody thought they had it, you know, or I got to sort through, you know, it was kind of.
Yep.
But so my point is at different levels, this stress can hit people within the family. And noticing, watching, you said a couple things that made me think, Chip, for space, because I love to go home and just jump into everybody's space. I'm home, and they're like, so to tiptoe a little bit quieter, maybe for the extrovert in me, that the introverts I live with are like, be quiet. So learning so that's an interesting, your awareness, our personal space is somewhat heightened when we're in this COVID. I know, I appreciate that. What final word would each of you leave for our listeners? Whoever can go first.
I would say grow as much as you can every day. I think there's a stream of, concern health-wise, medical, everything that's going on with COVID. None of us are quite sure. We look at the graphs and the charts every day, and, it can be very concerning. So there's a medical stress there. There's also political, and anything that has to do with Black Lives Matter and all of that's going on. There's a whole change societally, and we're a part of that and observing it. And then financially, there's a lot of people out of work, and that adds to a lot of stress for folks. So medically and financially and politically, societally, if that's a word, is really stressful. So there's plenty of opportunity to grow as a person, and then to have some discussions with the family on any one of those topics or other ones. It's a great opportunity, since we are at home more often than not. Why not use maybe a Sunday dinner, maybe at least once a week, to get together and to discuss some things. What are you learning? How are you growing? How are you coping? Things like that. It can be a tremendous opportunity for not only personal growth, but for couples growth, as well as, just the growth of a family as well.
It's great. Grow as a person.
Really good.
And Katie?
I would say have grace and compassion for yourself, and remember the context that we're in. I was speaking to a client a little while back who's a single mom with a very active 5-year-old at home, and was feeling like a garbage parent, she said, because she hasn't been able to limit her son's screen time as much as she wants. She got snippy with him a few times, and she was beating herself up over it. It's like, look at this context, look at the situation we're in. This is with absolutely the medical, the societal, the political upheaval. All of this stuff is going on right now. It's not just COVID, really. There's a lot. Keep that context in mind, and have a little grace and compassion for yourself, not to be making excuses for bad behavior or whatever, but to understand what's going on and understand, okay, how can I grow from this? What can I do differently?
Yeah. Growing, taking a step back. I think that's what you both kind of, growing as a person, and grace and compassion. It's feelings and emotions do tend to be heightened. So taking a couple deep breaths before, exerting something that you can't pull it back once you've said something or walked out, or emotions. What is a recent challenge that each of you have overcome?
For me, I don't, when I look at it and I think of everything that's going on in the world, it's like, this isn't really that big of a challenge. But honestly, getting married during this time and starting a life with somebody in COVID, like we got married at the beginning of April, and having to let go of the expectations and the plans that we had to celebrate with all of our friends and family. It was hard to let that go. I was really attached to that for a while, and that was a process of like grieving that and letting that go and moving on. But really, it's the being together at the end of the day, which we are, is what was most important. And thankfully, by the grace of God, we were able to do that. And now we have some really cool stories and 2 anniversaries that we get to celebrate. So it's all good.
I think what you just said, that's an interesting thing of grieving that expectation of what should have been. I think a lot of us are overcoming a lot of those things because life hasn't stopped. My goodness, we said on a earlier podcast, there's more people getting engaged and getting married right now. And it's different than what it would have been in the past, how we view everything. So grieving what could have been to what actually is, and I'm sure it was a beautiful, special time, and it doesn't change the outcome you and Tori are married.
Yep.
But it's still that that naming and understanding, identifying the feeling as grief versus a frustration, I think. Because there's a sadness with that. And Chip?
Well, the last almost year, it's almost been a year, July 8th, it'll be a year, I came down with what is called lumbosacral plexopathy, which means that the nerves in my spine were not firing into the left quadricep upper part of my leg, which meant that I fell down. I was in the middle of playing golf, went to put my putter into the bag, and I absolutely collapsed. I thought I had tripped. It felt like it. Tried to get up, couldn't get up, and finally, went to the doctor, and we did a lot of tests, a couple MRIs and CT scans, and said, well, you have what's called plexopathy. It could completely reverse, but it could take about 18 months. So now I walk with a cane. I walk a lot slower. I had to give up playing golf, and really long walks and all of it. So I've had to slow down considerably, and that's been a major, major challenge, and dealing with that emotionally as well. But it's given me such a heart for people that have handicaps. I really didn't, I have to say, I kind of ignored or overlooked people who had, handicaps that they walked or couldn't walk, or that they're in a wheelchair or any type of handicap. And so I've learned an awful lot since then, and I would have to say the Lord's really used that to broaden my compassion for people, and understanding, and a real appreciation for the difficulties all of us go through. They're not always physical, they're emotional, they're, societal, they're financial, they're familial, all kinds of difficulties. For me, it has been a lot of pain initially, and that's gotten better, and my leg's getting better, but I've had to slow down a lot and learn, and I'm writing a second book called Lessons from the Learning Chair, because I had to sleep for the first 6 weeks in my recliner because I couldn't stand to be on my back. So I was in the learning chair a lot, and learned a great deal, and wrote those things down. So that's becoming a book.
Wow. Turning that event into a blessing for others, that through your understanding, through your compassion.
Yeah.
That's wonderful. Not wonderful that you were hurt, and that you get better, and can get back on the golf course.
Yeah,
That's a great,
thank you.
yeah, for sure.
Thanks, Tammy.
Well, I want to thank both of you. We could stay on forever and ask more and more questions. I know I have a bunch, but it's that we can't go further here. For our listeners, if anyone would like to get in contact with Katie or Chip, I would say the best way is to reach out to Hannah at development@amc-ca.com, and then Hannah will relay the messages to either of them. They're both busy right now and doing different things, so we felt this would be the most secure way for you to be able to reach out and speak to them. And for both of you, just thank you for sharing your hearts and your expertise in this. Being able to some of the words that you were using, I didn't know that's what was happening. So now I can claim it. So, and I'm sure many others can too, because we're just trying to go through the motions here and do the best that we can. And so if we can continue to give ourselves grace just as much as we give other people grace, and find that joy in the journey, for sure. So I want to thank you both. And then Hannah, you want to finish up here?
Yeah, and for our listeners, thank you for tuning in again. And I really hope that you were able to take some application point away from this today. I know all of us have families, all of us have relationships and different things, or maybe you have this unicorn of a completely blissful family. But you probably have a friend that might have some hard stuff going on. So I really hope that you were able to take something away for you, for a friend. If you guys could leave us a rating and review, that would be a huge help. Also, if you are on Instagram, you can find us at AlternativesMC. And if you are on Facebook, we are just Alternatives Medical Clinic. So hopefully we will connect with y'all there. Talk to you soon.